They handed my brother the keys to a brand new Lexus for his birthday, while I got a $25 gift card to Starbucks and a pat on the back. They said he earned it with his fancy business degree. Little did they know, I was signing his paychecks, as the anonymous CEO of the very company they bragged about him working for. When they finally discovered the truth at the company gala, my father nearly collapsed, and my mother's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. But by then, I wasn't just their overlooked daughter. I was the woman who controlled their golden boy's future. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Chen, and I grew up in the shadows of Seattle, where rain wasn't the only thing that dampened my spirits. Most children grow up believing they're the center of their parents' universe. I learned early that I was more like a distant planet, barely visible in their telescope. My brother Ethan was their sun, bright, burning, and impossible to ignore. Our home was beautiful from the outside, a sprawling craftsman in Bellevue with a view of Lake Washington. But inside those walls, there was an invisible line drawn between Ethan's world and mine. His room was spacious, filled with the latest gaming systems, designer clothes, and trophies my parents displayed like precious artifacts. Mine was the smallest bedroom, practical and plain, with furniture from discount stores and walls left the same beige they'd been since we moved in. It wasn't always material things that showed the difference. It was the way my mother's eyes lit up when Ethan entered a room. It was how my father would interrupt my stories to ask Ethan about his day. It was the album full of Ethan's achievements and the empty spaces where mine should have been. You might wonder why. What made him so special? What made me so forgettable? Ethan was outgoing, charismatic, the type of person who could charm a room within minutes of entering it. The golden boy with the perfect smile who played varsity football and dated the prettiest girls. I was quieter, more analytical, always, with my nose in a book or working on some project nobody seemed to care about. Ethan's a natural leader, my father would say at family gatherings, his hand clasped proudly on my brother's shoulder. He's going to take the business world by storm. Meanwhile, I'd be helping in the kitchen or sitting in the corner, invisible. Despite graduating top of my class and running a successful blog about tech investments that was gaining serious traction, not that they ever asked, my mother was no better. Olivia, why can't you be more like your brother? Put yourself out there more. Boys don't like girls who are always so intense. Intense. That was their word for my focus, my determination, my refusal to play the social games that came so easily to Ethan. What they saw as intensity was actually purpose. I knew exactly what I wanted and how to get it. I just couldn't tell them. High school was when the divide between us became a chasm. Ethan was prom king, football captain, student body president, the works. I was president of the computer science club and editor of the school paper, achievements that got brief nods at best. When we both applied to colleges, my parents hired an expensive admissions consultant for Ethan. They proofread his essays, called alumni connections, and planned campus visits across the country. What about Olivia's applications? Our grandmother once asked during Sunday dinner. "Oh, Olivia's smart. She'll figure it out," my father said dismissively, turning back to Ethan's Stanford application. And I did figure it out. I received a full scholarship to MIT while Ethan got into Washington State with average grades and exceptional charm. My parents threw him a massive graduation party in our backyard. Caterers, a live band, a professional photographer. They invited everyone they knew. For my graduation, we went to dinner at Olive Garden. My father spent half the meal taking business calls. "It's just that Ethan's more social," my mother explained when I finally confronted her about the difference in celebrations. "He has more friends who would want to come to a party. We're celebrating you in a way that suits your personality, sweetie." Translation: We didn't think anyone would show up for you, so why bother? The gap widened during college. Ethan transferred to the University of Washington's business school after his second year, closer to home so my parents could attend his football games. He joined a fraternity and became its president, of course. My father covered his apartment, his car, and his frequent networking expenses at upscale bars. Meanwhile, I thrived at MIT, diving into computer science and business management. I developed an algorithm for predictive market analysis during my sophomore year that caught the attention of several venture capital firms. By junior year, I had secured seed funding for my own tech startup, operating under a business name with me as the anonymous founder. Why anonymous? Perhaps it was years of conditioning, of being overlooked, that made me wary of putting myself in the spotlight. Or maybe I was already planning what would come next. Either way, I operated through a carefully constructed business entity with private investors who respected my wish for anonymity. My company, NextTrend Analytics, began as a data analysis firm that helped businesses predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. When I called home with news of my first major client, my mother answered. "That's nice, honey," she said distractedly. "Can I call you back? Ethan just got an internship offer from Cascade Innovations, and we're taking him shopping for suits." Unts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Cascade Innovations. The irony was almost too perfect. They were one of the companies that had approached me about acquiring my algorithm. I had declined their offer, finding their corporate culture too rigid and their vision too limited. But I kept that information to myself. "Sure, Mom. Congratulations to Ethan." That summer, I didn't go home. I stayed in Boston, growing my company and refining my algorithms. NextTrend expanded rapidly, attracting clients from Fortune 500 companies who were willing to pay premium prices for our predictive insights. I hired a CEO as the public face of the company, Jensen Park, a brilliant business strategist who had recently retired from a major tech firm and was looking for a new challenge. He became both my mentor and my front, understanding that my anonymity was non-negotiable. By the time I graduated from MIT, NextTrend was valued at $40 million. I moved the headquarters to Seattle, not out of nostalgia for home, but because the tech ecosystem there provided the perfect environment for our expansion. Jensen remained as the public CEO, while I, the company's true owner and chief architect, worked behind the scenes as OC, supposedly a reclusive technical genius who communicated only through Jensen. My parents knew none of this. When I returned to Seattle, they assumed I was just another tech worker in the city's booming industry. I rented a modest apartment in Capitol Hill and told them I worked as a data analyst for a startup. They didn't ask questions. They were too busy celebrating Ethan's newest achievement, a junior executive position at Cascade Innovations, secured, largely through my father's golf buddy who sat on their board. "Your brother's on the fast track," my father boasted during one of our rare family dinners. "Vice president by 30, I'm calling it now. You should ask him to put in a good word for you at Cascade. They might have some entry-level data jobs that would be more stable than working for a startup that could fold any day." I nodded and took another bite of my salmon, swallowing both the food and the urge to tell him that my unstable startup had just acquired a small machine learning company for $15 million in cash. That dinner was the catalyst for what came next. As I drove home, something crystallized within me. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my worth. Years of being diminished had created a hollow space inside me, and no amount of business success seemed to fill it. I realized I was still that girl in the corner, seeking validation from people who had never really seen me. The next morning, I called Jensen to my office at NextTrend. "I want to acquire Cascade Innovations," I said without preamble. Jensen raised an eyebrow. "They're 4 times our size." "Currently," I agreed, but they're overvalued and their predictive technology is 3 years behind ours. Their last 2 product launches missed projected revenues by 30%. Their stock will drop when the quarterly numbers come out next month. And you know this because our algorithms predicted, it's 6 months ago. I've been watching them. They're ripe for acquisition, and their board knows it. They just don't know we know it. Jensen studied me for a long moment. This is personal, isn't it? I met his gaze steadily. Everything in business is personal to someone, but it's also good business. Cascade has market reach and manufacturing capabilities we can use, and we have the innovation they desperately need. After a moment, he nodded. I'll start making calls, but a hostile takeover will be expensive and messy. Who said anything? About hostile? We're going to make them think it was their idea. And so began the most intricate game of corporate chess I'd ever played. Nextrend partnered with Cascade on a joint venture, giving them limited access to our predictive tools for a specific project. As expected, the results were impressive enough that their executive team pushed for closer integration. Meanwhile, I had Jensen discreetly approach several of their board members about potential investment opportunities. By the time Ethan had been at Cascade for 7 months, my plan was well underway. Nextrend had acquired enough shares through various channels to become Cascade's largest minority shareholder. Their CEO, Michael Winters, began courting Jensen aggressively, floating the idea of a merger where they would be the dominant partner. All the while, I watched from the shadows, attending meetings as Jensen's technical advisor, a quiet woman in simple business attire who took notes and said, "Little. No one paid much attention to me, just as no one had throughout my life." It was almost comical how being underestimated had become my greatest advantage. Ethan rose quickly at Cascade, just as my father had predicted. Not because of any particular business acumen, but because he was charming and well-connected. He became a favorite of Michael Winters, who saw in Ethan a younger version of himself, all confidence and networking skills with others to handle. The technical details. What Ethan didn't know was that his team's increasingly successful projects were secretly being guided by Nextrend's algorithms, the same ones he had once dismissed as my sister's computer hobby. Each time he presented a successful market forecast or product recommendation, he was unknowingly using my work. My parents were ecstatic about Ethan's success. Sunday dinners became showcases for his latest achievements, with my mother proudly serving his favorite meals and my father introducing him to important business contacts. "Ethan closed the Anderson account," my father would announce. "Biggest deal of the quarter." "What exactly did you do at work today, Olivia?" my mother would ask, her tone suggesting data analysis must be terribly boring compared to Ethan's dynamic role. "Mostly programming and statistical analysis," I would reply vaguely, not mentioning that I'd spent the day negotiating a $50 million line of credit for Nextrend's next phase of expansion. The dynamic came to a head at Ethan's 28th birthday. My parents rented out the top floor of one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants. They invited at least 100 people, family, friends, business associates. They spared no expense. Premium open bar, 5-course dinner, a live jazz band. When I arrived, my mother greeted me with a distracted kiss on the cheek before rushing off to make sure the champagne was properly chilled. My father barely noticed me, too busy introducing Ethan to the CEO of a major retail chain. I found a quiet corner and watched the celebration unfold. Ethan was in his element, moving from group to group, his laugh carrying across the room. He had always been like this, effortlessly commanding attention, drawing people to him like a magnet. After dinner, my father clinked his glass for attention. "We have a special gift for our son," he announced, beaming with pride. "For the young man who has exceeded every expectation and makes us proud every day." My mother handed Ethan a small box with a bow. Inside was a key fob with the Lexus logo. "It's parked downstairs," my father said. "The one you've been eyeing?" For months. You've earned it, son. Applause erupted as Ethan hugged our parents, his face lit with genuine surprise and joy. I clapped along with everyone else, ignoring the familiar twinge in my chest. Later, as the party was winding down, my mother found me as I was preparing to leave. "Oh, we have something for you too, Olivia," she said, reaching into her purse. She handed me a small envelope. "Happy belated birthday." My birthday had been 2 weeks ago. They had forgotten until my grandmother called to ask if I'd received her card. Inside the envelope was a $25 Starbucks gift card and a note that read, "Treat yourself. Love, Mom and Dad." "Thanks," I said, tucking it into my bag. "You should stick around," my mother urged. "Ethan's taking a group to continue the celebration at Axis nightclub. It would do you good to socialize more." "I have an early meeting tomorrow," I replied, which was true. I was meeting with our lawyers to finalize the details of our offer to Cascade Innovations. "Always working," she sighed. "You know, there's more to life than computers, Olivia." I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had never really known me. "Yes, there is," I agreed quietly. "Good night, Mom." As I rode the elevator down to the parking garage, I made a decision. The careful strategy I had been implementing would accelerate. It was time to stop waiting in the wings of my own life. The next morning, I gave Jensen the go-ahead. Next trend. Made a direct offer to Cascade's board, a merger that would infuse Cascade with much-needed capital and cutting-edge technology. The terms were generous on the surface, with Cascade maintaining its brand identity and organizational structure. The fine print, however, made it clear that NextTrend would have controlling interest. To sweeten the deal, we offered retention packages to key executives, including a significant promotion for Ethan. His new title would be Director of Strategic Partnerships, reporting directly to the CEO. What the offer didn't specify was that the CEO would no longer be Michael Winters. Cascade's board took less than a week to accept our offer. They had seen the writing on the wall. Their technology was lagging, and their market position was weakening. NextTrend offered them a lifeline that allowed them to save face. The merger was announced with the usual corporate fanfare. Press releases highlighted the synergies between the companies and the enhanced capabilities the combined entity would offer clients. Michael Winters was quoted saying he looked forward to a new chapter of innovation and growth. What wasn't mentioned was that Winters had negotiated a generous exit package. Within 3 months of the merger's completion, he would step down, and Jensen Park would become CEO of the combined company. The night of the announcement, my parents called me, bubbling with excitement. "Did you hear about Ethan's company?" my mother gushed. "They're merging with some big tech firm, and Ethan's getting promoted. They're having a gala to celebrate next month. Your father's already ordered a new tuxedo." "That's great," I said. "I'm happy for him." "You should come to the gala," my father said, surprising me. "Ethan can put you on the guest list. It would be good for you to network with people from bigger companies than that startup you're at." "I'll think about it," I replied, not mentioning that I had already approved the guest list, including my own name, not as Olivia Chen, but as O.C. Dad, the reclusive founder of NextTrend, who would finally be making a public appearance. The month leading up to the gala was a flurry of activity. The merger moved forward rapidly, with integration teams working around the clock. I deliberately kept a low profile, letting Jensen handle the public aspects while I prepared for what would come next. Ethan called me once during this period, more animated than I'd heard him in years. "Liv, you won't believe what's happening," he said. "The company that's acquiring us, NextTrend, their founder, is this mysterious genius who's been completely behind the scenes until now. Everyone's buzzing about the big reveal at the gala." "That sounds exciting," I said, managing to keep my voice neutral. "Yeah, and get this. I'm being groomed for senior leadership post-merger." Jensen Park himself told me I have exactly the right profile for the new direction of the company. Jensen Park? You've met him? Just briefly. Impressive. Guy. Very smart, very strategic. But everyone's more curious about this OC person. Apparently, they founded NextTrend right out of college and have been the brains behind all their innovations. Sounds impressive, I agreed. Anyway, Mom said you might come to the gala. You should. It's going to be the event of the year. I'll be there, I promised. Wouldn't miss it. The night of the gala arrived, crisp and clear for Seattle in autumn. The event was being held at the Olympic Sculpture Park, with its stunning views of Puget Sound and the Olympic Mountains. A glass pavilion had been constructed among the sculptures, glowing like a lantern against the darkening sky. I arrived early, before most guests. Not as Olivia Chen, sister of Ethan, but as the founder of NextTrend, dressed in an elegant black gown with a simple emerald pendant, my grandmother's, the only family member who had ever truly seen me. My hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, my makeup understated but flawless. Jensen met me at a private entrance. "Ready for this?" he asked, offering his arm. I took a deep breath. I've been ready for years. We entered through a side door and went directly to a small waiting room where the executive team from both companies was gathering for pre-event photographs and final briefings. Michael Winters was there, along with Cascade's executive team, including Ethan, resplendent in his new tuxedo, hair perfectly coiffed, looking every inch the rising corporate star. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? In his mind, his sister was the plain, serious girl who worked with computers, not this composed woman in evening wear standing beside Jensen Park. Jensen cleared his throat. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to the founder and true CEO of NextTrend, the visionary behind all our technology, and the architect of this merger. This is OC, or as some of you may know her, Olivia Chen." The room went silent. Ethan's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips, his eyes widening in shock as recognition dawned. "Olivia?" he whispered. I smiled, feeling strangely calm. "Hello, Ethan." Michael Winters recovered first, his corporate training kicking in as he stepped forward with an extended hand. "Ms. Chen, this is quite a surprise. A pleasant one, of course." "I'm sure it is," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I'm looking forward to a smooth transition as Jensen takes the helm." The photographer began arranging us for photos, creating a buffer of activity that delayed further questions. Ethan kept staring at me, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been admiration or fear. I couldn't quite tell. The real moment I had been waiting for came later, when my parents arrived. They entered the main pavilion like visiting royalty, my father adjusting his bow tie with practiced confidence, my mother radiant in a blue gown that she had mentioned shopping for weeks ago. "To complement Ethan's big night," she had said. They circulated through the crowd, introducing themselves as Ethan Chen's parents, to anyone who would listen. I watched them from across the room, standing beside Jensen as we greeted key clients and board members. "Those are your parents?" Jensen murmured, following my gaze. "Yes." "Do they know yet?" "They're about to." The formal program began with Jensen taking the stage to welcome everyone. He spoke eloquently about the vision of the combined companies, the exciting future ahead, and then paused dramatically. "Tonight is historic not just because of this merger, but because it marks the first public appearance of NextTrend's founder and true genius, the person who developed our core technology, and has guided our strategy from the shadows. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce you to OC, Olivia Chen." The spotlight found me as I walked to the stage amidst thunderous applause. I could see my parents in the crowd, their expressions confused as they glanced at each other, mouthing my name in disbelief. I took the microphone, my voice steady as I addressed the crowd. I spoke about innovation and vision, about seeing patterns others miss, about the future we were building together. Professional, poised, powerful, everything they had never believed I could be. And finally, I concluded, I want to acknowledge the Cascade team for their partnership in this venture, particularly their rising star, Olivia Chen, who I'm proud to say will be heading our new Strategic Partnerships division. More applause as Ethan, still looking slightly dazed, raised his hand in acknowledgement. Ethan and I actually grew up together, I added with a small smile. You could say technology and business have been a friendly competition in our family for years. I could see my father's face drain of color as the implication of my words sank in. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering. On the marble floor, the sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet around them. After my speech, as guests mingled and celebrated, my parents remained rooted in place, shock written across their faces. I made my way to them calmly, accepting congratulations and well wishes from attendees as I moved through the crowd. Olivia? My father finally managed when I reached them. Your OC? The founder of Next Trend? Yes, Dad, I am. But how? When? Your job. You said you worked at a small startup. I do work at the company I founded, yes. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for my arm. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the confusion and hurt in her eyes. For a moment, I felt a twinge of the little girl who had always wanted her approval. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. When have you ever been interested in my achievements? Before she could answer, Ethan appeared at my side. He looked different somehow, smaller, less confident than I had ever seen him. You're my boss, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. My little sister is my boss. Technically, Jensen is your direct supervisor, I replied. But yes, I own the company that now controls Cascade. He shook his head, then surprised me by laughing. That's actually amazing, Liv. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would you have believed me if I had? I asked. Or would it have been dismissed as Olivia's computer hobby again? He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry, I really am. I never realized. My father interrupted, his business instincts finally overriding his shock. Olivia, what exactly does this mean for Ethan's position? Is his promotion secure? Of course. Even now, his first concern was for Ethan. Some things never changed. Ethan's position is based on his performance, just like everyone else's, I replied coolly. If he excels, he'll advance. If not, he won't. For the first time in his life, he'll be judged solely on his own merits. Nothing more, nothing less. My mother gasped softly. My father's face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. Now, if you'll excuse me, I continued, I have other guests to attend to. We can discuss this further at another time. As I turned to leave, my mother called after me. Olivia, wait, please. I paused, looking back at her. Are you doing this to punish us? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question caught me off guard. Was I? Had all of this been about revenge? About finally making them see me? About watching their golden boy become subordinate to the daughter they had always overlooked? No, Mom, I finally answered. I'm doing this because it's good business. Cascade needs what Next Trend has, and we need what they have. The fact that it happens to be Ethan's company is an interesting coincidence. But why all the secrecy? Why not tell us you were successful? I considered her question, weighing my words carefully. I spent my entire life trying to get you and Dad to notice me, to value what I could do. At some point, I realized that no achievement would ever be enough. So I stopped trying to earn your approval and started building something for myself. Instead, I looked between them, these two people who had shaped me in ways they had never intended. The secrecy wasn't about you. It was about me finding my own way without the weight of your expectations, or lack thereof. My father's expression shifted, a flicker of something like recognition crossing his features. Olivia, we always knew you were smart. But you never thought I was special, I finished for him. Ethan was the special one. I was just reliable. The steady one who didn't need attention or celebration or a new Lexus for her birthday. Something crumbled in my mother's expression. We never meant to make you feel that way. I know, I said, and I meant it. You didn't do it deliberately, you just never saw me clearly. The conversation might have continued, but Jensen appeared at my elbow, apologetically informing me that the mayor had arrived and was asking to meet me. I excused myself, leaving my parents standing there, the foundations of their family narrative suddenly unstable beneath their feet. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. I played my role perfectly, the brilliant, driven founder finally stepping into the spotlight. If people noticed the tension between me and my family, they were too polite or too strategic to mention it. Ethan found me again later as the event was winding down. He had ditched his suit jacket and loosened his tie, reminding me suddenly of the boy he had been before success, and our parents' favoritism had shaped him into someone else. I had no idea, Liv, he said simply. All these years. I know. Did you? Did you plan this? Targeting Cascade because I worked there? I considered lying, then decided against it. Not initially. But when I heard you had joined them, it became a factor in my strategy. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. After a pause, he asked, What happens now? Now? Now we run a company together. You learn the business from the ground up, really learn it, not just charm your way through it. And we see if you're as good as everyone has always told you you are. And if I'm not? I smiled slightly. Then you find something you are good at. Something that makes you happy, not just something that makes our parents proud. He seemed to consider this, turning his champagne glass in his hands. You know what's crazy? Part of me feels relieved. Like I can finally stop pretending to be this perfect person everyone expects me to be. Welcome to authenticity, I replied. It's terrifying and liberating all at once. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the last of the guests filtering out. They're going to need time, Ethan finally said, nodding toward our parents, who were waiting by the coat check, looking somehow smaller than they had at the beginning of the evening. It's a lot for them to process. I know. I straightened my shoulders, but I'm not going to pretend to be less than I am anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. He surprised me by giving me a genuine smile. Good. You shouldn't. After a moment, he added, For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, Liv. What you've built is incredible. The words touched something inside me that I had thought was long hardened. Thank you, I said softly. As I drove home that night, the Seattle skyline glittering against the darkness, I thought about worth and validation and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. I had spent so long being defined by what I wasn't, not outgoing like Ethan, not the favorite, not worthy of celebration. I had let that narrative shape me, drive me, until my success became both shield and weapon. But standing on that stage, tonight, revealing myself as OC, I had felt something unexpected. Not the bitter satisfaction of revenge or the vindication I had imagined, but a quiet, steady certainty. I was finally fully myself, not defined by their perception or lack thereof, but by what I had built with my own hands and mind. The recognition in my parents' eyes wasn't what had healed me. It was the recognition in my own. The coming weeks would be complicated. There would be awkward family dinners and difficult conversations. My parents would vacillate between pride in their newly discovered successful daughter and resentment at having been kept in the dark. Ethan would struggle with his new role and the shifted dynamic between us. But for the first time, I felt ready to face it all as Olivia Chen, not the overlooked daughter, not the secret CEO, just me. Complete and worthy, whether they saw it or not. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Ethan. "So, does this mean you can afford your own Lexus now? Because I'd hate to have to share mine with the boss." I laughed out loud, a genuine laugh that echoed in the quiet car. Maybe there was hope for us after all. What would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. The distance between Ethan and me only widened as we entered our college years. While I was immersing myself in code and algorithms at MIT, building something that would change my life forever, my brother was living the stereotypical college experience that my parents had always envisioned. Football, games, fraternity parties, and just enough studying to get by. Every weekend, my parents would drive to watch his games. They'd send care packages filled with his favorite snacks and brand new UW merchandise. Meanwhile, I received perfunctory monthly calls that rarely lasted more than 5 minutes. "How are your classes?" my mother would ask. "They're challenging but good," I'd reply, not mentioning that I was developing an algorithm that 2 professors had already called revolutionary. "That's nice, dear. Did you get the gloves I sent? It gets cold in Boston." The gloves were 2 sizes too big. She'd accidentally ordered Ethan's size. During my sophomore year, I created an algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. My advanced computing professor, Dr. Reeves, pulled me aside after I presented it in class. "Olivia, do you realize what you've built?" "Here?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement behind her glasses. "This could revolutionize how companies make strategic decisions." I shrugged, uncomfortable with her enthusiasm. Years of being overlooked had made me wary of praise. "It's just an application of neural networks to historical market data, with some modifications to account for socio-political variables." Dr. Reeves laughed. "Just? Olivia, tech companies would pay millions for this kind of predictive capability. You need to protect this work immediately." With her guidance, I patented my algorithm and started developing it into a more comprehensive platform. I worked through holidays, spring break, even pulled all-nighters during finals week to refine my creation. While other students were securing internships at established tech giants, I was laying the groundwork for something entirely my own. During winter break of my junior year, I returned home to Seattle for an obligatory family visit. On my first night back, my parents hosted a dinner to celebrate Ethan's new internship at Cascade Innovations, one of the city's most prestigious tech companies. "A foot in the door at Cascade is worth its weight in gold," my father boasted to our gathered relatives. "The VP of sales is my golf buddy. He says Ethan has executive presence. That's something you can't teach." I sat silently, picking at my mother's pot roast as everyone fawned over Ethan's accomplishment, an internship secured through connections rather than merit. After dinner, my uncle cornered me in the kitchen. "So, what are you up to at school, Olivia? Still doing that? Computer stuff?" "Yes," I replied simply, knowing from experience that explaining my work would only glaze eyes and change subjects. "You know," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "Ethan could probably get you an interview at Cascade for when you graduate. Wouldn't hurt to have a backup plan. Those programming jobs can be unstable." I smiled tightly. "I'll keep that in mind." Later that night, as I lay in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, something crystallized within me. I was tired, not just physically, but soul-tired, of being the afterthought, the safety net sibling, the one who didn't require attention because I was smart enough to figure it out. I was tired of dimming my light so Ethan could shine brighter. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I wasn't going to seek my parents' validation anymore. I wasn't going to explain my achievements or beg for recognition. Instead, I would build something so undeniable that they would have no choice but to see me, truly see me, for the first time. When I returned to MIT after break, I approached Dr. Reeves with a business plan. I want to turn my algorithm into a company, not just license the technology, I told her. But I need to do it differently. I want to remain anonymous as the founder. She looked at me curiously. That's unusual. Most founders want recognition. I have my reasons, I replied, not willing to admit that part of my motivation was to reveal myself at the perfect moment, on my terms, not theirs. Dr. Reeves connected me with venture capitalists who specialized in tech startups. Under strict NDAs, I demonstrated my algorithm's capabilities. The results were undeniable. My technology could predict market shifts weeks before traditional methods, with accuracy rates that made seasoned investors lean forward in their chairs. "We're in," said Daniel Forster of Apex Ventures after my presentation. "But the anonymity request is unconventional. The founder's story is typically a key part of the marketing." "My technology speaks for itself," I countered. "And I want Jensen Park as the public face." Jensen was a recently retired tech executive with an impeccable reputation who'd been mentoring me through MIT's entrepreneurship program. He had the business acumen and connections I needed, and more importantly, he understood my vision. "Fine," Daniel conceded. "But we're not writing a blank check for a mysterious founder. We'll need regular proof that you're delivering on your promises." With $2 million in seed funding, NextTrend Analytics was born. I incorporated in Delaware for privacy, established a complex legal structure to protect my identity, and designated myself in company documents only as OC. Jensen became the public CEO, while I was listed as Chief Technology Officer, a reclusive genius who preferred to work behind the scenes. By the time I graduated from MIT, NextTrend had secured 3 major clients and was generating enough revenue to fund our expansion without diluting my ownership further. I moved our headquarters to Seattle, partly because of the city's tech ecosystem, but mostly because I wanted to be close when my plan came to fruition. I rented a modest apartment in Capitol Hill, telling my parents I had accepted a position as a data analyst at a small startup. They barely registered the information, too busy celebrating Ethan's graduation and new full-time role at Cascade Innovations. "They're grooming him for leadership," my father told anyone who would listen. "The CEO himself has taken Ethan under his wing." What my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Cascade had been struggling for years. Their technology was becoming obsolete, their market share eroding steadily as more innovative competitors emerged. They maintained a good public image, but internally, they were desperately seeking new technological advances to remain relevant. I knew all this because NextTrend's algorithms had predicted Cascade's downward trajectory 18 months earlier. I had been watching them closely, not just because of Ethan's position there, but because they represented the perfect acquisition target, an established company with strong industry relationships, but weak innovation. At NextTrend, we were growing rapidly. Within 2 years of my graduation, we had expanded to 30 employees, all brilliant minds working to refine and expand our predictive technology. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies who paid premium prices for our insights. I worked tirelessly, often sleeping on the couch in my office, pouring every ounce of myself into building something extraordinary. Jensen was the perfect frontman, charismatic, respected, and completely loyal to me. In public, he was the visionary CEO. In private, he deferred to my leadership without question. "You know," he said to me once after a particularly successful quarterly review, "most people spend their entire careers trying to achieve what you've built before turning 30. Are you ever going to tell your family?" I looked out the window of our office, the Seattle skyline spread out before us, the Space Needle piercing the cloudy sky like an exclamation point. "When the time is right," I replied. "Not before." The time began approaching faster than I had anticipated. NextTrend had reached a valuation of $120 million, and we needed to scale rapidly to meet demand. Acquisition became our strategy: find smaller companies with complementary technology and integrate them into our ecosystem. That's when Jensen proposed the idea that would set my revenge in motion. "Have you considered Cascade?" he asked during our strategic planning session. "They're vulnerable, but they have the client base and infrastructure we need." My pulse quickened. "They're much larger than us." "On paper," Jensen agreed. "But their last 2 quarters have been disastrous, and rumor has it they're struggling to secure additional funding. Their board might be receptive to the right offer." I kept my face neutral, but inside, excitement flared. This was it. The opportunity I had been waiting for. Not just a sound business move, but a chance to finally step out of the shadows on my own terms. "Draft a proposal," I said calmly. "Let's see what it would take." Over the next 6 months, we methodically laid the groundwork. NextTrend partnered with Cascade on a limited project, giving them just enough access to our technology to make them hungry for more. Jensen cultivated relationships with key board members, floating the idea of a merger that would benefit both companies. Meanwhile, I strategically acquired Cascade stock through various investment vehicles, becoming their largest minority shareholder without triggering disclosure requirements. All the while, I maintained my facade at family gatherings. I listened to my parents extol Ethan's rapid rise at Cascade, how he was becoming indispensable to the executive team, how they had always known he was destined for greatness. "Michael Winters himself told your father that Ethan has CEO potential," my mother gushed during one Sunday dinner, referring to Cascade's chief executive. "He said Ethan reminds him of himself at that age." I nodded politely, suppressing a smile at the irony. Michael Winters, the man who had been secretly meeting with Jensen to discuss a potential merger, had no idea that his protégé's overlooked sister was orchestrating his company's acquisition. What my family also didn't know was that Ethan's brilliant insights that had earned him such praise were largely powered by limited access to NextTrend's predictive tools through our partnership. His team had been given carefully controlled use of our technology for specific projects, and Ethan had been taking full credit for the remarkable results. I didn't blame him for this. In his position, I might have done the same. Ethan had always been taught that he was exceptional, that success was his birthright. He had never needed to question whether his achievements were truly his own because everyone around him had always affirmed his inherent brilliance. The merger negotiations accelerated faster than even I had anticipated. Cascade's financial position was worse than publicly known, and their board was eager for a lifeline that would allow them to save face. Jensen negotiated masterfully, securing terms that would give NextTrend controlling interest while allowing Cascade to maintain its brand identity and organizational structure, at least initially. The final negotiation session took place in a private dining room at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant. I attended as Jensen's technical advisor, a quiet woman in the background taking notes while the real decisions were made. Michael Winters barely glanced at me, his attention focused entirely on Jensen and the lawyers. "One final condition," Winters said as they were about to sign the agreement. "I want assurances that my leadership team will be retained, particularly Olivia Chen. He represents the future of this company." Jensen glanced at me imperceptibly. I gave a slight nod. "Of course," Jensen replied smoothly. "In fact, we have plans for Ethan's advancement post-merger. His talents haven't gone unnoticed." Winters seemed satisfied, unaware that he had just negotiated the continued employment of the brother of the woman who would soon control his company. The irony was exquisite. The merger was announced with appropriate corporate fanfare. press. Releases highlighted the synergies between the companies and the innovative future ahead. What wasn't publicly disclosed was that Winters had negotiated a generous exit package that would see him step down 3 months after the merger's completion, with Jensen taking his place as CEO. The night of the announcement, my parents called me, their voices brimming with excitement. "Olivia, have you heard about Ethan's company?" My mother gushed. "They're merging with some tech firm called NextTrend. Ethan says it's a great opportunity for him. He's getting promoted to Director of Strategic Partnerships." "That's wonderful," I replied, marveling at how they had already framed a corporate acquisition as another achievement for Ethan. "There's going to be a gala to celebrate the merger next month," my father added. "Very exclusive, but Ethan says he can get you an invitation. It would be good for you to network with people from bigger companies." "Thank you," I said. "I'll definitely be there." What I didn't tell them was that I had already approved the guest list, including my own name. Not as Olivia Chen, but as OCO, the founder of NextTrend, who would finally be making her public debut. As the date of the gala approached, I prepared meticulously. I purchased a designer gown in deep emerald that complemented my complexion, a far cry from the practical, forgettable clothes I usually wore around my family. I scheduled appointments for hair, makeup, and nails at Seattle's top salon. I even hired a stylist to ensure every detail of my appearance was perfect. This wasn't vanity, it was strategy. I wanted to be unrecognizable at first glance, to control the moment of revelation completely. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my apartment, looking out at the Seattle skyline glittering against the night sky. For years, I had lived with a gnawing emptiness, the hollow space created by being perpetually overlooked, perpetually second best. I had channeled that emptiness into ambition, using it as fuel to drive me forward when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. But standing there, on the precipice of finally being seen, I wondered if it would fill that void. Would my parents' recognition, forced though it might be, heal what their neglect had broken? Would finally stepping out of Ethan's shadow allow me to become whole? I didn't know. But I was about to find out. The Olympic Sculpture Park had been transformed for the gala. A glass pavilion erected among the sculptures housed elegantly set tables and a small stage. The Space Needle shone in the distance, and the waters of Puget Sound reflected the lights of the city like a mirror of stars. I arrived early, entering through a private entrance to join Jensen and the executive team for pre-event photographs and final briefings. As I walked into the small waiting room, conversations stuttered to a halt. I was used to being invisible. The sudden attention was disorienting. Jensen stepped forward, his eyes widening appreciatively at my transformation. "Olivia, or should I say OC, you look remarkable." "Thank you," I replied, smoothing the silk of my gown. "Is everyone ready?" Michael Winters approached, extending his hand. "Ms. Chen, we haven't been properly introduced. I'm Michael Winters, CEO of Cascade." His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied my face. "Have we met before?" "In passing," I replied with a small smile. "I attended a few of the partnership meetings as a technical advisor." He nodded, clearly not remembering me, a testament to how thoroughly I had perfected the art of being unmemorable when I needed to be. As we were preparing to enter the main pavilion, Ethan arrived, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo. He was laughing, with a colleague, his golden boy charm on full display. When he saw the group, he made his way over, extending his hand to Jensen first. "Mr. Park, good to see you again. Looking forward to working more closely after the merger." "Likewise, Ethan," Jensen replied, a hint of amusement in his voice that only I would recognize. "Have you met our founder? This is OC." Ethan turned. To me, professional smile in place, hand extended, and then froze, his eyes widening in shock as recognition dawned. "Olivia?" he whispered, his hand dropping to his side. I smiled, feeling strangely calm despite the thundering of my heart. "Hello, Ethan." He blinked rapidly, struggling to process what he was seeing. You're OC? The founder of NextTrend? That's not possible." "I assure you it is," I replied, surprise. His face cycled through emotions, disbelief, confusion, shock, before finally settling on something like awe. "But how? When? All this time you've been building this company? This technology everyone's been talking about?" "Since college," I confirmed. MIT wasn't just computer stuff, as our family so eloquently put it. Ethan's face flushed, with embarrassment. He opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment, a staff member informed us it was time to make our entrance. The conversation would have to wait. As we filed into the main pavilion, I caught sight of my parents near the bar. They looked exactly as I had expected, my father in his best suit, congratulating himself on his proximity to corporate success. My mother elegant in blue, basking in reflected glory. They hadn't noticed me yet, their attention focused on networking, with other guests undoubtedly introducing themselves as Ethan Chen's parents. Throughout the cocktail hour, I circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations and engaging in small talk. I deliberately stayed on the opposite side of the room from my parents, building anticipation for the moment that was soon to come. Finally, Jensen took the stage to officially welcome everyone. He spoke eloquently about the vision of the combined companies, the exciting future ahead, and then paused dramatically. Tonight is historic not just because of this merger, but because it marks the first public appearance of NextTrend's founder and true visionary, the person who developed our core technology and has guided our strategy from the shadows. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce OCI Olivia Chen. The spotlight found me as I walked to the stage amidst thunderous applause. From the corner of my eye, I could see my parents in the crowd, confusion written across their faces as they glanced at each other, mouthing my name in disbelief. I took the microphone, my voice steady as I addressed the crowd. I spoke about innovation and vision, about seeing patterns others miss, about the future we were building together. I was professional, poised, powerful, everything they had never believed I could be. And finally, I concluded, I want to acknowledge the Cascade team for their partnership in this venture, particularly their rising star, Ethan Chen, who I'm proud to say will be heading our new strategic partnerships division. More applause as Ethan, still looking slightly dazed, raised his hand in acknowledgement. "Ethan and I actually go way back," I added with a small smile. "You could say technology and business have been a friendly competition in our family for years." The implication of my words rippled through the crowd. I could see my father's face drain of color, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The moment I had imagined for years was unfolding exactly as I had planned, and yet I felt none of the satisfaction I had anticipated, only a strange, hollow calm. As I stepped down from the stage, guests swarmed around me, eager to introduce themselves to the newly revealed founder of NextTrend. I accepted their congratulations graciously, but my attention was fixed on my parents, who remained rooted in place, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Across the room, I could see Ethan watching me, his face unreadable. For the first time in our lives, he was in my shadow, not the other way around. The realization should have been sweet, but instead, I felt a surprising pang of empathy. I knew how it felt to be overlooked, to be second best. It wasn't a feeling I would wish on anyone, not even the brother who had unwittingly eclipsed me for so long. As the evening progressed, I knew the confrontation with my parents was inevitable. The question was no longer if it would happen, but how, and whether the revelation would heal or deepen the wounds of our past. The moment I had dreamed about for years was finally unfolding. As I moved through the gala in my emerald gown, I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me. The room sparkled with wealth and influence, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light over designer gowns and bespoke suits, the quiet clink of champagne glasses punctuating the hum of conversation. This world of power and prestige was supposed to be Ethan's birthright, not mine. Yet here I stood at its center, while he orbited the periphery. I watched my parents from across the room. They were still frozen in place, champagne forgotten, their faces a study in disbelief. My mother's hand trembled as she clutched my father's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. He shook his head, eyes never leaving me as I navigated through the crowd of admirers and well-wishers. "Ms. Chen, your predictive algorithm is revolutionary," said the CTO of a major retail chain, shaking my hand vigorously. "I'd love to discuss potential applications for our inventory management systems." "Of course," I replied, smiling professionally. "Have your team reach out to schedule a meeting next week." As I turned away, I found myself face to face with Ethan. Up close, I could see the shock in his eyes had given way to a complex mixture of emotions: confusion, admiration, and something that looked almost like fear. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. I nodded. "Not here." He led me to a secluded corner of the pavilion, partially hidden behind a massive sculpture of twisted metal that reached toward the glass ceiling like desperate fingers. "All this time," he began, gesturing vaguely at the gala, at me, at everything, "you've been building an empire while pretending to be—" "What? Some ordinary programmer at a no-name startup?" "Yes. Why?" His voice cracked slightly on the word. "Why the secrecy? Why not tell any of us?" I studied my brother's face, the face that had smiled from countless framed photographs throughout our childhood home, the face our parents had looked at with such undisguised pride. "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "Would they?" He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it, the truth of my words clearly hitting home. "I guess we'll never know now," he finally said. His eyes hardened slightly. "So what happens to me in all this? Was this your plan all along? Take over my company? Humiliate me in front of everyone?" "This isn't about you, Ethan," I replied, surprised at how true it felt saying it aloud. "It never was. Nextrend acquiring Cascade makes perfect business sense. Your position in the company is based on your own merits." I paused, allowing the irony to settle between us. "Whatever those might be." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Those brilliant insights that got you promoted? The predictive analysis your team has been lauded for? That was Nextrend's technology through our partnership. That was my algorithm, Ethan." The color drained from his face. "That's not—" "I worked hard on those projections." "I'm sure you did," I said, not unkindly. "But without our tools, would you have achieved the same results?" He had no answer for that. We stood in uncomfortable silence, years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings stretching between us like a chasm. "So, what now?" he finally asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "You fire me? Get your revenge?" The question echoed in my mind, forcing me to confront my own motivations more directly than I had allowed myself to before. Was this about revenge? About finally having power over the golden boy who had unknowingly cast such a long shadow over my life? "No," I said decisively. "You keep your position, your title, your office. But from now on, you earn it. No more coasting on charm and connections. No more taking credit for other people's innovations." I met his eyes directly. "Show me what Ethan Chen is actually capable of, without the safety net." A flicker of something like respect crossed his face. "And if I can't?" "Then you'll fail on your own terms," I replied. But I don't think you will. You've never had to try before. Not really. Maybe it's time. Before he could respond, a voice cut through our conversation. Olivia? I turned, to find my parents standing behind me, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. My mother looked as though she might faint, her knuckles white around her clutch purse. My father's expression was unreadable, his corporate mask firmly in place despite the shock in his eyes. Mom? Dad? I acknowledged calmly. Your OC? My father asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. The founder of Nextrend? Yes. But how? My mother looked between me and Ethan, as if seeking confirmation that this wasn't some elaborate prank. Your job. You said you worked at a small startup. I do, I replied simply. Mine. Why didn't you tell us? My father's voice had an edge to it now, as if I had deliberately withheld information he was entitled to know. I raised an eyebrow. When would that have happened exactly? Between celebrating Ethan's latest promotion and complaining that I should find a more stable career. The barb hit its mark. My mother flinched, and my father's jaw tightened defensively. That's not fair, Olivia, he began. We've always supported both of you. Differently, I finished for him. You supported us differently. Ethan got connections, opportunities, celebrations. I got told to figure it out myself. We thought you were capable of handling things on your own, my mother interjected, her voice taking on the wounded tone she had perfected over the years. You were always so independent. Independent by necessity, I corrected her, not by choice. A waiter discreetly approached our 10th circle, informing me that Jensen needed me for a photo with the mayor. I nodded, grateful for the interruption. We should talk about this later, I told my parents. This isn't the place. As I turned to leave, my father caught my arm. Olivia, wait. Is this some kind of revenge? Taking over Ethan's company like this? I looked at his hand on my arm, then up into his face. The face that had beamed with pride at Ethan's football games and frowned with disappointment at my academic achievements. Not everything is about Ethan, Dad, I said quietly, gently removing his hand. Acquiring Cascade makes perfect business sense. The fact that your golden boy happens to work there is an ironic coincidence, nothing more. I walked away, feeling their eyes on my back as I rejoined the celebration. Inside, emotions warred for dominance, vindication and emptiness, triumph and a peculiar sense of loss. The moment I had anticipated for years had arrived, and yet the satisfaction I had expected remained elusive. The remainder of the gala passed in a blur of congratulations and business discussions. I played my role perfectly, the brilliant, driven founder graciously accepting accolades for her vision and innovation. But beneath the professional exterior, my mind kept returning to the look on my parents' faces when they realized who I really was. It wasn't until much later, as the event was winding down, that I spotted my family again. They were huddled together near the exit, my mother looking drained, my father speaking intensely to Ethan, who nodded with an unfamiliar seriousness. When they noticed me watching, they fell silent, exchanging glances before my father squared his shoulders and approached me. We're heading home, he said stiffly. I assume you'll be busy with all this. He gestured vaguely at the remaining guests, the impressive venue. Yes, I replied, matching his formal tone. There's still work to be done. He nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Perhaps you could come to dinner on Sunday. We should talk about things. It wasn't an apology or even an acknowledgement of what had happened between us, but it was an invitation to continue the conversation, to potentially bridge the chasm that had widened tonight. I'll check my schedule, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting his offer. Good night, Dad. He seemed about to say something more, then thought better of it. With a curt nod, He returned to my mother and Ethan, and the three of them departed. A family unit that suddenly seemed more fragile than I had ever realized. As their figures disappeared through the exit, Jensen appeared at my side. "Families," he said simply, having witnessed enough to understand the situation. "They're complicated." "Yes," I agreed. "They are." "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. "The reveal?" I considered his question, thinking about the shock on my parents' faces, the complicated mixture of emotions in Ethan's eyes. The answer wasn't as clear as I had once thought it would be. "I don't know yet," I admitted. But it was necessary. Later that night, as my driver navigated through Seattle's quiet streets toward my apartment, I found myself adrift in thoughts I had long suppressed. The validation I had sought for so many years had finally arrived, but it felt hollow somehow, like finding water in the desert only to discover it couldn't quench my thirst. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "I didn't know about any of it, about what you were capable of. I'm sorry." The simple message caught me off guard. In all our years, I couldn't remember Ethan ever apologizing to me. Not when he broke my science project the night before it was due. Not when he forgot to pick me up after debate club in the pouring rain. Not when he casually took credit for fixing our grandmother's computer when it had been me who spent hours troubleshooting the issue. I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed, "It's not your fault. You were just being who they raised you to be." His reply came quickly. "And who did they raise you to be?" The question pierced something deep within me. Who had they raised me to be? The overlooked daughter? The self-sufficient one who didn't need attention or praise? The shadow to Ethan's light? Or had their neglect inadvertently shaped me into something entirely different? Someone resilient, determined, capable of building an empire from the ground up while no one was watching? I didn't have an answer for him. Not yet. When I arrived home, I kicked off my heels and stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the dark waters of Puget Sound. The night air was cool against my skin, carrying the faint scent of salt and possibility. For so long, I had defined myself in opposition to Ethan, the serious one to his carefree charm, the worker to his golden child, the shadow to his spotlight. I had channeled years of resentment into ambition, using it as fuel when dedication alone wasn't enough to keep me going through sleepless nights and endless challenges. But standing there with my company's future secured and my family's perception of me irreversibly altered, I wondered if it was time to redefine myself, not as Ethan's overlooked sister or my parents' second-choice child, but simply as Olivia Chen, on my own terms. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Who was I when not refracted through the prism of my family's expectations and oversights? What did I want beyond proving my worth to people who had never truly seen me? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my computer, reviewing Nextrend's projections for the coming year, our integration plans for Cascade, the new products we could develop with their infrastructure and our technology. I lost myself in the work that had always been my refuge, my proving ground, my path to self-determination. As dawn broke over the Seattle skyline, I had made a decision. The merger would proceed as planned. It was sound business strategy, regardless of the personal complications. But I would approach the integration differently than I had originally intended. This wouldn't be about dominance or retribution. It would be about creating something greater than the sum of its parts, including the complicated, broken parts of my relationship with my family. I sent an email to Jensen outlining some modifications to our integration plan. Then I texted Ethan, "Coffee? There are things we should discuss about the future of the company." His response was immediate. "Name the place and time. I'll be there." I hesitated, then added, "This isn't about the past. It's about what we can build going forward." 3 dots appeared as he typed his response. I'd like that, more than you know. Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step toward something new. A relationship based not on competition or resentment, but on mutual respect and recognition of each other's true capabilities. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. The merger officially closed, and integration teams began the complex work of combining two established companies into one cohesive entity. I stepped fully into my role as founder and chief technology officer of NextTrend, no longer hiding behind Jensen's public persona. My presence at the office caused quite a stir among Cascade employees. Most had never seen me before, or if they had, they hadn't registered the quiet woman in Jensen's shadow. Now, as I walked the halls of what had been Cascade's headquarters, I could feel the weight of their curious gazes, hear the whispers that followed in my wake. That's her, Olivia Chen, the founder everyone's been talking about. I heard she built the algorithm while still in college. Isn't she Ethan Chen's sister, the one from the third floor? I found Ethan in what had been Michael Winter's corner office, boxes stacked around him as he prepared to move to his new space. He looked up as I entered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features before he composed himself. Olivia, he greeted me, standing awkwardly. Or should I call you Ms. Chen now? Olivia is fine, I replied, taking in the opulent office with its panoramic views of the city. Settling in? Actually, I'm moving out, he said, gesturing to the boxes. This was Winter's office. It doesn't feel right to take it. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his uncharacteristic modesty. Where are you going? There's a smaller office near the strategic partnerships team, he explained. I thought it made more sense to be closer to the people I'll be working with. It was a practical decision, the kind I would have made. Not the choice of someone who prioritized status and appearances over function. Smart, I acknowledged, earning a small smile from him. I'm trying, he said simply. We spent the next hour discussing the integration of our teams, the potential synergies between NextTrend's predictive technology and Cascade's market presence. Ethan was surprisingly insightful, demonstrating a grasp of business strategy I hadn't given him credit for. You've thought about this a lot, I observed, as he outlined his ideas for restructuring the partnerships division. He shrugged. I've had a crash course in reality this past week. Finding out your little sister is secretly a tech mogul tends to make you reevaluate your life choices. I laughed despite myself. I suppose it would. A tentative smile crossed his face. It's good to hear you laugh. I don't remember the last time I heard that. The observation sobered me. We haven't had much to laugh about together, have we? No, he agreed quietly. But maybe that can change. As I left his office, I felt a strange lightness. The conversation had been professional, productive, but beneath it ran a current of something I hadn't expected. The possibility of reconciliation, not just as colleagues, but as siblings. That evening, I received a call from my mother. Olivia, she began hesitantly, your father and I were wondering if you'd reconsider coming to dinner on Sunday. I closed my eyes, picturing the familiar dining room where I had sat through countless meals feeling invisible. I'm not sure that's a good idea right now, Mom. Please, she said, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. We want to understand how all this happened, who you've become. The plea caught me off guard. In all our years, I couldn't remember my mother ever expressing genuine interest in my life or achievements. Who I've become has been there all along, I said carefully. You just never looked closely enough to see it. A painful silence followed. Then, you're right. And that's on us. But we'd like the chance to see you now, if you'll give it to us. The request was humble, genuine in a way I hadn't heard from her before. Still, years of disappointment made me wary. I'll think about it, I promised, not committing either way. That's all we're asking, she said softly. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat in my office, watching the sunset paint the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and crimson. So much had changed in such a short time. The careful walls I had built around myself, the secret identity I had cultivated, the distance I had maintained from my family, all had crumbled in a single evening. I wasn't sure if I was ready to bridge the gap that had existed between us for so long. Dinner at my parents' house felt like stepping back into a role I had fought to escape, the dutiful daughter seeking approval I would never receive. And yet, something had shifted. The shock on their faces at the gala hadn't just been about the revelation of my success. It had been the realization that they had fundamentally misunderstood who I was, what I was capable of. Perhaps that recognition could be the foundation for something new, not an erasure of the past, but an acknowledgement of it and a commitment to move forward differently. The next day, Jensen called me into his office. The board is impressed with how smoothly the integration is proceeding, he informed me, particularly with how you're handling the Cascade leadership team. I nodded, accepting the compliment. They're talented people, Ethan included, surprisingly enough. Jensen studied me thoughtfully. You know, when we first discussed this acquisition, I wondered if it was too personal for you, if your history with your brother might cloud your judgment. And now? Now I think perhaps it's given you insight that another executive might lack, he replied. You're approaching this with a unique perspective, balancing accountability with opportunity in a way that's bringing out the best in everyone involved. His observation made me pause. Was that what I was doing? Creating space for people, including Ethan, to rise to their potential while holding them to high standards? It was the opposite of what my parents had done, where Ethan had been celebrated regardless of merit while I had been overlooked despite achievement. Leadership isn't about making people feel small so you can feel big, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. It's about creating conditions where everyone can succeed on their own merits. Jensen smiled approvingly. Exactly. And that's precisely what you're doing. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, Ethan appeared in my doorway, jacket in hand. Got a minute? He asked. I gestured for him to enter. What's up? He sat across from me, fidgeting slightly with his watch, a nervous habit from childhood I was surprised to see resurface. I've been thinking about something you said at the gala, he began, about whether I would have achieved the same results. Without NextTrend's technology. I waited, giving him space to continue. The answer is no, he admitted, meeting my eyes directly. I wouldn't have. I've been riding on charm and connections my whole life, taking shortcuts where I could, letting people, especially mom and dad, smooth the path for me. The candor of his self-assessment surprised me. This wasn't the Ethan I knew, the golden boy who never questioned his own entitlement to success. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want to earn my place here, he replied seriously. Not because I'm your brother, or because Winters negotiated it in the merger, but because I actually deserve it. He took a deep breath. And I'm asking for your help to do that. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. My help? You built something incredible from nothing, with no advantages, no safety net. I want to learn from you. Not just the business side, but how to stand on my own. The request was so unexpected, so counter to our established dynamic, that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. Ethan Chen, golden child, asking his overlooked sister for guidance? It was a twist I hadn't seen coming. It won't be easy, I warned him. I won't give you special treatment because we're family. If anything, I'll expect more from you. He nodded solemnly. I understand. That's exactly what I'm asking for. I considered his request, weighing years of resentment against the genuine change I saw in him now. Perhaps this was an opportunity, not just for Ethan to grow, but for me to heal, to transform my relationship with my brother into something healthier, more balanced. All right, I agreed finally. We'll start tomorrow. Come to the office an hour early. We have integration models to review. Relief and determination mingled in his expression. I'll be there. Thank you, Olivia. As he turned to leave, I added, "Oh, and Ethan," Mom called. "She wants me to come to dinner on Sunday." He paused in the doorway. "Are you going?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure yet." "What do you think?" He considered the question seriously. "I think they're genuinely trying to understand what they missed all these years. It won't be comfortable for any of us, but maybe it's necessary." His insight surprised me again. "When did you get so wise?" A rueful smile crossed his face. "Somewhere between finding out my little sister secretly runs a tech empire and realizing everything I thought I knew about myself was built on sand." He shrugged. "It's been an educational week." After he left, I sat in my quiet office, contemplating the unexpected turns my life had taken. The revelation I had orchestrated as an act of vindication had somehow opened the door to reconciliation. Instead, the family that had overlooked me for so long was now seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time, and I was seeing them differently too, not as the all-powerful arbiters of my worth, but as flawed humans capable of change. I picked up my phone and texted my mother. "I'll be there Sunday, 6 p.m., and yes, I still like apple pie." Her response was immediate, a simple that spoke volumes in its uncharacteristic emotional directness. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Years of established patterns couldn't be erased in a week, no matter how transformative. There would be missteps and old wounds reopened. My parents might slip back into their habit of favoring Ethan. I might retreat into resentment and distrust. But something fundamental had shifted. The secret I had carried for so long, the knowledge of my own worth, independent of their recognition, was now in the open. I had stepped fully into my power, not just as the founder of Next Trend, but as Olivia Chen, a woman who had built her success on her own terms. And perhaps the greatest revelation wasn't that my family finally saw me for who I truly was. It was that I no longer needed their validation to know my own value. That freedom, to define myself beyond the narrow constraints of their perception, was the true victory, more meaningful than any corporate acquisition or public acclaim. As dusk fell over Seattle, I gathered my things and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integration plans to finalize, teams to restructure, a brother to mentor, a family dinner to navigate. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I faced these prospects not with the gnawing need to prove myself, but with the calm confidence of someone who already knew her worth. The overlooked daughter had become the architect of her own destiny, and in that transformation lay a power greater than revenge, the power to rewrite not just my own story, but perhaps my family's as well. Sunday arrived with the soft patter of Seattle rain against my windows. I stood in front of my closet, deliberating what to wear for dinner at my parents' house, my first visit since the revelation at the gala. Part of me wanted to arrive in tacky, full CEO armor, designer suit, statement jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek power bun. But another part, perhaps wiser, recognized that this evening wasn't about reinforcing barriers, but potentially dismantling them. I chose a simple cashmere sweater and jeans, casual but quality, comfortable yet confident. As I navigated the Aitiao, familiar streets toward the Bellevue home where I'd grown up, anxiety and determination battled for dominance in my chest. The house looked exactly as it always had, pristine landscaping, warm lights glowing from within, the picture of suburban success. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. This wasn't a corporate negotiation or a product launch. This was far more complex. the beginning of what might be the most challenging integration of my career. Merging my authentic self with a family that had never truly known me. My mother answered the door, her face a mixture of nervousness and hope. "Olivia," she said, stepping back to let me enter. "You came." I said I would. The house smelled of roasting chicken and apple pie, my favorite meal, though I was surprised she remembered. My father appeared from his study, looking unusually hesitant, as if approaching a business associate whose proposal he wasn't sure how to evaluate. "You look well," he said awkwardly. "Success agrees with me," I replied, the words coming out more pointed than I'd intended. An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only when Ethan emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron and carrying a wooden spoon. "The sauce needs more salt," he announced, then smiled tentatively at me. "Hey, Liv. Glad you came." His casual warmth dispelled some of the tension. I followed him into the kitchen, leaving our parents to compose themselves. "Since when do you cook?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged. "Started learning last year. Got tired of takeout." He stirred a simmering pan of what looked like mushroom sauce. "Also, I figured someone should help Mom tonight. She's been anxious about this dinner all week." The consideration surprised me. "That's thoughtful of you." "I'm trying new things," he said simply, "including being a better brother." Before I could respond, my mother entered, smoothing her already perfect hair. "Dinner's almost ready. Olivia, would you like some wine? We have that Pinot Noir you used to like." Again, I was caught off guard by her remembering this detail. "Yes, thank you." My father appeared with an opened bottle, pouring generous glasses for everyone. "I always knew you were smart, but this is revolutionary," Ethan finished for him. "The entire industry has been trying to replicate what Olivia built. No one's come close." The pride in his voice, pride for me, not himself, was yet another surprise in an evening full of them. After dessert, my father insisted on showing me something in his study. I followed him into the familiar room, with its dark wood shelves and leather chairs, the space where he had always retreated, to work or read the financial papers in solitude. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk, removing a folder I had never seen before. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Inside the folder were newspaper clippings, printouts, and what looked like financial statements, all about Nextrend. "What is this?" I asked, confused. "I've been following your company for almost 2 years, he admitted. "Not knowing it was yours, of course. I was impressed by the innovation, the growth trajectory. I even considered investing when they announced a private funding round last year." I stared at him, trying to process this information. "You've been tracking Nextrend all this time?" He nodded, looking almost embarrassed. "I make it a habit to follow emerging tech companies with promising technologies. Jensen Park's leadership seemed extraordinary. The vision, the execution." He met my eyes directly. "It was you all along. That vision, that execution, it was my daughter." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, but it was tinged with regret. The recognition of what he had missed by focusing on the wrong child. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I want you to know that even when I didn't see you, the real you, standing right in front of me, I saw your work. I recognized its brilliance." He shook his head ruefully. "I just never imagined the connection." It was a small consolation that my father had admired my company without knowing it was mine. But it was something. A bridge, perhaps, between who we had been to each other and who we might become. As I prepared to leave later that evening, my mother handed me a small box. "I found this in the attic last week," she explained. "I thought you might want it." Inside was my 6th grade science fair ribbon, first place for a computer program I had written that simulated ecosystem dynamics. I had been so proud of that project, had spent weeks working on it after school and on weekends. My parents had attended the fair, but left early for one of Ethan's football games. "You kept this?" I asked, surprised. She nodded, looking ashamed. "We kept everything, Olivia. All your awards, your school reports, newspaper clippings when you made honor roll. We never knew how to show you that we were proud. You seemed so self-sufficient, so independent." "I wasn't," I said softly. "I just learned to act that way because the alternative was too painful." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. For all of it." I fingered the faded ribbon, a tangible reminder of the girl I had been. Always striving, always hoping for recognition that rarely came. "Thank you for this," I said finally. "And for dinner." It was a start. My father helped me with my coat at the door, his movements uncharacteristically tentative. "Will you come again?" he asked. "Perhaps next Sunday?" The invitation was offered almost shyly, as if he expected rejection. The role reversal was striking. My confident, authoritative father, suddenly uncertain in the face of his successful daughter. "I'd like that," I found myself saying. "Maybe we could invite Grandma too. She always believed in me, even when no one else did." His face lit up. "She'd love that. She's been asking about you constantly since she heard the news." I stepped out into the cool Seattle night, a sense of cautious possibility settling around me like a new coat. The conversation hadn't erased years of hurt, but it had opened a door that I had believed permanently closed. Whether we would walk through it together remained to be seen, but the opportunity now existed where before there had been only walls. The next morning, I arrived at the office early to review Ethan's proposal before our integration team meeting. To my surprise, he was already there, coffee brewed, documents organized on the conference table. "I brought breakfast," he said, gesturing to a bag from my favorite bakery. "Almond croissants. Still your favorite, right?" The thoughtfulness of the gesture, remembering my preferred pastry from our childhood, touched me more than I expected. "Yes," I confirmed, accepting the offered bag. "Thanks." We spent the next hour going over his proposal for streamlining the client transition process. It was genuinely innovative, combining elements of Cascade's relationship management approach with NextTrend's technological efficiency in a way I hadn't considered. "This is good work," I acknowledged when we'd finished reviewing the framework. "Really good." The pride that flashed across his face reminded me of the boy he had once been, seeking approval, validation, recognition. It occurred to me that perhaps Ethan and I weren't as different as I had always believed. We had both been shaped by our parents' expectations, just in opposite ways. "I meant what I said at dinner," he told me earnestly. "I want to earn my place here, Liv, not just because I'm your brother or because the previous CEO negotiated it, but because I deserve it." "And I meant what I said too," I replied. "I'll hold you to a higher standard, not a lower one, because we're family." He nodded, accepting the challenge. I wouldn't want it any other way. As the integration team members began filing into the conference room, I watched Ethan greet them with his characteristic charm. But there was something different now, a new depth to his interactions, a genuine interest in their perspectives that hadn't been there before. Jensen arrived last, raising an eyebrow at the sight of Ethan and me already deep in discussion. "Family breakfast meeting?" he quipped as he took his seat. "Professional colleagues reviewing a proposal," I corrected him, but without heat. "Ethan has some ideas for the client transition that I think merit serious consideration." The meeting proceeded with a new energy. With my explicit support, Ethan presented his framework confidently, but without his usual bravado. The team engaged thoughtfully, building on his ideas, refining the approach. I could see Jensen watching the dynamic with interest, noting the shift in how Ethan and I related to each other, no longer defined by the shadow of our family history, but by our professional capabilities and shared goals. Afterward, Jensen pulled me aside. "That was interesting," he observed. "Your brother seems different." "He is," I confirmed. "Or maybe he's always had this potential, and no one expected him to use it before." "Including himself?" I considered this. "Especially himself, perhaps." Jensen nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes people rise or fall to meet our expectations of them. Your brother has been coasting on charm and connections his whole life, because that's what everyone expected from him. Enough to get by, but never excellence. And now? Now he has a sister who expects excellence and believes he's capable of it." Jensen smiled. "That's a powerful motivator." His observation resonated with me. Had my parents' low expectations of me paradoxically pushed me to excel, to prove them wrong? Had their high but shallow expectations of Ethan limited him to superficial achievements? The thought followed me through the day as I observed Ethan working with his team, throwing himself into the integration process with an energy and focus I had never seen from him before. He wasn't just playing the part of the executive, he was becoming one, step by deliberate step. That evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, Ethan appeared in my doorway. "Got a minute?" he asked. I gestured for him to enter. "What's up?" He sat across from me, fidgeting slightly with his watch, that nervous habit again. "I wanted to thank you for today, for giving my ideas a fair hearing." "They were good ideas," I said simply. "That's all that matters here." He nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at dinner last night, about what Mom and Dad said, about seeing in me what they wanted to see in themselves." "What about it?" "I think they did the same thing to you, in a way. They saw you as the serious independent one because that's how they needed to see you to justify focusing on me." He met my eyes directly. "But I'm wondering if maybe I did the same thing, if I needed to see you as the quiet, overlooked sister to justify being the golden child." His insight surprised me yet again. This self-awareness was new, and somewhat disconcerting coming from the brother I had always dismissed as superficial. "What are you saying, Ethan?" "I'm saying I never really saw you either. I benefited from Mom and Dad's favoritism, but I never questioned it, never tried to correct it." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "And I'm sorry for that. Truly sorry." The simplicity of his apology, so direct, so unequivocal, echoed our mother's words from the night before. It was becoming clear that the revelation of my success had sparked genuine soul-searching throughout my family. "Thank you," I said, accepting his apology with more grace than I might have imagined possible a week earlier. "That means a lot." "So where do we go from here?" he asked, echoing our mother's question from dinner. "As siblings, I mean, not just as colleagues." It was the question I had been asking myself since the gala. What did I want from my relationship with Ethan now? The brother who had unknowingly cast such a long shadow over my life, but who was now showing me glimpses of a depth and insight I had never credited him with possessing. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think maybe we start by getting to know each other as adults, not as the roles we were assigned in childhood." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like that." Then, with a hint of his old humor, he added, "Though I have to say, finding out my little sister is actually my boss is a plot twist I never saw coming." I laughed despite myself. "Life is full of surprises." "Indeed it is," he agreed, standing to leave. At the door, he paused. "Hey, Liv. For what it's worth, I'm really proud of what you've built. Not just the company, but the person you've become despite everything." His words touched something within me that I hadn't realized was still raw. The acknowledgement from my golden child brother, not of my success, but of my journey, felt like the closing of a circle somehow. "Thank you," I said simply. That means more than you know. After he left, I sat in my quiet office, contemplating the unexpected turns my life had taken. The revelation I had orchestrated as an act of vindication had somehow opened the door to reconciliation instead. The family that had overlooked me for so long was now seeing me clearly for perhaps the first time, and I was seeing them differently. Too, not as the all-powerful arbiters of my worth, but as flawed humans capable of growth and change. The path forward wasn't clear or easy. Decades of established patterns couldn't be erased in a week, no matter how transformative. There would be missteps and old wounds reopened. My parents might slip back into their habit of favoring Ethan. I might retreat into resentment and distrust. But something fundamental had shifted. The secret I had carried for so long, the knowledge of my own worth, independent of their recognition, was now in the open. I had stepped fully into my power, not just as the founder of NextTrend, but as Olivia Chen, a woman who had built her success on her own terms. As I gathered my things to leave the office, I caught my reflection in the window. Backlit by the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle illuminated against the night sky. I hardly recognized the woman looking back at me, not because of the designer, clothes, or the confident posture, but because of the serenity in her eyes. The gnawing need for validation that had driven me for so long had been replaced by something quieter but more powerful. The certainty of my own value, regardless of whether others recognized it. It occurred to me then that perhaps the greatest victory wasn't that my family finally saw me for who I truly was. It was that I no longer needed their vision to define me. That freedom, to be fully myself, without reference to their perception, was the true prize, more valuable than any corporate acquisition or public acclaim. I switched off my office light and headed for the elevator, thinking about the Sunday dinner ahead, the integration meeting tomorrow, the countless decisions large and small that would shape the future of NextTrend and Cascade. But most of all, I thought about the new terrain opening before me, a life where I was neither the overlooked daughter nor the secret CEO, but simply Olivia Chen, architect of her own destiny. What would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.